The Final Destination franchise. No real name for it outside of simply that. Even the cover just calls it the 5-film collection. I actually bought this a year or two ago. Finally got around to watching them all. I bought this instead of buying, because I got it for $5, dearer than the DVD Trilogy, which I actually plan to potentially buy that because of a special feature that's only included on the 3rd film DVD, which we will get into my notes section, which is disappointing. But at the same time, it is also called the Trilogy, which is a really cool name. So I might get that for $10 just because it's a cool name. So let's talk about the Final Destination franchise in a calm and relaxed talk. Calm and Relaxed Talk is a series of videos I do where I talk about action films or horror films, or in this case, kind of both because it's a thriller. And I just calmly talk about them, explain a bit of the plot without hopefully spoiling too much, give you my thoughts on the film, or films, depending on how many films there are in the franchise, and give my review out of 5, because I based them off my Letterboxd review. So I've written down a 6-page spiel of stuff to do with the Final Destination films. So let's get into it. Is it going to load? Oh, wow, okay. Final Destination. Final Destination is a 2000 film, is a film from the year 2000. Weird to say a 2000 film, but that's the truth. It is directed by James Wong. My review, I always start with my quotes. It'd be a fucked up god to take down this plane. Ho ho, we love our foreshadowing. Not a perfect film and definitely a thriller over a horror, which I guess makes sense if you buy the Trilogy set, but overall a nice Rube Goldberg design of death. First and foremost, I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5, which is usually what I give the films. That 3 stars is, yeah, either it's a generic idea or it's a nice execution of a generic thing, but then it has a bit more oomph factor to it. Something that's nice, that stands out, that makes it a bit more tasty. In this case, the whole concept is what makes it tastier. And I like how it, the tone is dark and its pacing is slow and morbid. It's nice, It's not gratuitous, not yet. So let's talk about the plot. So Devon Sawa? Yeah, sure, whatever. That's the actor's name, I believe. Portrays a teenager who cheats death after having a premonition of a catastrophic plane explosion. He and several of his classmates leave the plane before the explosion occurs, but death later takes the lives of those who were meant to die on the plane. It is a fun idea. What if you accidentally cheated death, and then death came after you? Noteworthy stuff, the concept was stretched into a feature-length idea from what would have been an X-Files episode, because James Wong and the other writer on the first, second, and I think maybe the 5th film, maybe the 4th, the original writer and overall creator with James Wong were on the X-Files and had made this idea for a TV episode. Then they just pitched it to, I think it was, well, in this case, New Line Cinema, but yeah. And so now we have a 5-film franchise, which is pretty good from one simple idea. The pace is a little slower than most thrillers, even with its teen death angle, mostly because it relies on the character drama built off the deaths surrounding the characters. Because death has meaning and weight in this film, which is something they more or less kind of discard in further entries for more fun, over-the-top deaths, whether this be, overly bloody or gory, or it's just going for a more comedic aspect, especially by the 4th entry in the franchise. An alternate set of scenes involved. This is kind of a spoilery thing for the first film, so you can skip a little along, but I assume that you should have watched these films by now. I definitely say, if you haven't watched the rest of these films, go and watch them, and then come back. Simple as that. But I'm going to assume that you've watched them, And except for the fifth film, I will actually have a spoiler section for that. And, well, let's just get the hell into the rest of it. So an alternate set of scenes involved a permanent way to cheat death, which involved the lead female character getting pregnant and having a kid, aka the best way to cheat death is to create new life. However, this was scrapped in the final project due to two things. Firstly, audience engagement in the test screenings were like, wow, that was a really great film with a really flat and boring ending because, the female survives, one of the other guys who cheated death and was saved, so death surpassed him, survived, and so they survive, but the main character dies, and he sacrifices himself, and of course the girl has a baby, which is from the main character, and yeah, they just kind of go to the memorial and life just kind of continues. But of course, they decided to reshoot that complete ending, like cut out all those extra scenes about her being pregnant and whatever. And the main character, instead of dying, survives. And then the three characters go to Paris a few months later, and it's like, hey, isn't it great? But then they're like, but wait, what if because it skipped you, what if it went back to me and all this stuff? And the main character realizes, oh shit, I'm gonna die, but I don't want my girlfriend and my friend to die, so I'm gonna leave them so I can get, potentially get killed. And then he almost does, and then he gets saved, and it's like, but I saved you, and then the film ends with another character getting killed off. And so the ending just holds the idea of death will come for you no matter, whether you've cheated death before or whether it will occur naturally, but mostly for the point is, if you've cheated death, it will come after you again. And then we jump straight into, of course, Final Destination 2. Final Destination 2 is a 2003 film directed by David R. Ellis. My review, my quote of course, "You can't cheat death, there are no escapes." This is actually a line said by, I think it's Tony Todd, who does appear as a coroner in the first film, very creepy, very eerie, very Tony Todd, and pretty much explains to the main character that they have cheated death, and the best way to kind of, surpass that is maybe by saving someone else's life, so he kind of gives you the gist of the rules. And of course he comes back in the second one so they can kind of elaborate on it more, and he even explains, maybe the best way to cheat death is to create new life, which is probably going on the idea from the first film about, getting pregnant and having new life. And they even go with that with literally one of the characters who maybe was meant to die is pregnant, and they're like, oh, if she gives birth, then we all survive. But then the main character realizes that the pregnant woman never died in her premonition to begin with. So suddenly it's a oh shit moment. So I like how they brought that idea from the first film, and instead of it being a get out of jail free card kind of deal for the rest of the team, it's like, oh shit, how do we actually survive this? And so they actually survive it by, well, we'll get into it. So this film is simple. It takes the idea of the first film, sprinkles in new characters and one old character, technically two if you include Tony Todd, and makes the deaths even more fun. The characters are easily written, have, specific characteristics, so we understand them and can relate and maybe even, care for them depending on how well developed they are. But for the most part, they're just simple characters. We understand what they are, who they are, and it's a very formulaic deal. This especially is repeated over and over and over for the rest of the franchise. The narrative, though, feeling messy, is a lot less dramatic than the first film, which is mostly because these characters don't actually know each other, and they're all just kind of trying to cheat death. It's instead of it being like, oh, they're all teenagers, they all know each other, they've all been through this tragedy. It's like, nope, they're just random people on this bypass that survive this catastrophic crash, which includes, logs from a truck, falling off, ramming for other cars, cars crushing into cars. It is catastrophic. It is outstanding. It's my favorite of the crazy explosion premonitions. In fact, if I was to rate them, I'd probably go the second film, then the fifth film, then the first film, and then probably the third film, and then the fourth film. But the third and the fourth are equal because the fourth film uses CGI and it becomes really... I mean, they all use CGI, but the fourth film is just really shittily done. But then the third film isn't as over the top as the second film, so it's kind of disappointing. Nevertheless, roller coaster, so yeah. So this film's off to a great start as it is, with the trucks and everything blowing up. It's great. The motorway scene is incredibly done. Very well done in terms of special effects. And so, of course, these characters don't actually know each other, so when they all start realizing on the news that other characters who survived the crash with them died, through strange circumstances, they all realize, oh shit, there is something here that we're missing out on. What the fuck's going on? So, of course, then it becomes let's try and save each other's lives and whatever, and getting the character from the first film to explain it more. Yada, yada, yada. But of course, death is still after the main character the only surviving character from the first film. Honestly, though, I love this film over the first film. The effects are incredible, whether CGI or practical, and the kills are impeccable in contrast to the first one. Obviously, because this one's more lighthearted and fun, and just gives you brutalized kills, and it's great. It's having as much fun with the idea as possible, rather than it being a more serious, dramatic film. Obviously dropping the dead teenager film aspect. You can tell that they are wanting the deaths to be gratuitous, but also have kind of a realistic setup and follow-through, still with the Rube Goldberg film, but it's just a little cartoony. It's very, how do I display it, tongue-in-cheek, but also Looney Tune-esque, and it's really fun. It is just pure fun, and its runtime is perfect for that you get enough time with the characters, but, you kind of there aren't characters in this one that you're rooting for them to die. They don't really introduce really dumb and annoying characters until the third film. This film more or less has characters that you like, and you kind of want to survive. I mean, of course, you don't really want people to die as it is, but it's you're not rooting for them to die. It's not like, oh, this guy's an asshole from the get-go, like the fourth film has a racist redneck, and it's oh, I can't wait for him to die, and it's yeah, but in the third one, in the second one, they're not over the top of it. It's just, these people are just kind of your everyday Joes. And so it's the way that they die is much more dramatic because, and even arguably traumatic, because it's they're just random people like you or me or whatever, So, yeah, there's no real villain or asshole character that gets what he deserves kind of deal, which doesn't happen until the next three films anyway, but it's I like that they don't have that, because the next three films annoys me with those aspects. So anyway, again, it just makes them caricatures rather than characters, which this film obviously doesn't do. It still they aren't the most 3D characters in this film, but it is still a supernatural horror slasher film, or thriller film, so yeah. Yeah, its runtime was just perfect enough for you to care about some characters, but mostly just watch people get picked off at just the right speed, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I guess I should mention the plot, which I don't know why I didn't do that first. This film takes place 1 year after the plane crash in the first film, and a similar premonition that involves a truck carrying logs that fall off and create a major car accident, which is shown in spectacular fashion, as I said. The people who were killed obviously survive due to our main character, and it's up to the group of unrelated nobodies to figure out how to survive together or alone. Shut up, I didn't take this from Wikipedia. My notes. This film has a quicker pace than the first film and less dramatic story, replacing the teen death aspect with people of all ages and creeds, which is quite nice. It makes it more relatable to people who aren't, teenagers. So it's still a film designed for a teenage audience, but I can relate to it more because I'm not a teenager. I probably wouldn't relate to it as much anyway if I was a teenager, so, The death effects and scenes are a lot more fun, but are just as effectively set up as the first film. Again, the whole Rube Goldberg design. And, of course, they bring back a survivor from the first film and actually use her effectively, not just, of course, as exposition, but as, a key to potentially beating death, which is usually the reason why you have the character that survives and whatever, which it's implied that these are the main two. So the main two characters from the first film, the male and the female, who get together in the end. It's they both survive to the end of the film, and it's okay, so what happens to them by the time of the second film? And we find out that the main character from the first film, just gets killed randomly because a brick falls on his head. So you know, it's a cheap kill off between films kind of deal, but it forces our, you know, this last surviving character to go into isolation. She goes into a psych ward. She's like, this is where I can be my most safe. And of course, she just decides to, as a character, I'm not going to be a coward. I'm not going to try to cheat death by just doing nothing for the rest of my life. I'm going to see if I can save this next group of people to the best of my ability. And of course, though she does die, unfortunately, which kind of is predictable, but, you know, because you'd expect that she would at some stage, but it's random when she does, and it's very fun. The last two remaining characters survive through one thing only. The cop character, because there's a female kind of teenager. Well, no, she's not a teenager. She's like probably a college student or something. She'd have to be old enough, I'd say, in her early 20s. She and a cop survive. The reason for this is the cop saved her to begin with, so that, you know, he saved someone else's life, meaning that he was safe for the rest of the film, because that's how death skips over him. And she survives by drowning. So she dies. But then she gets resurrected because the doctors who are at the hospital right next to the lake that she drowns in saved her life. And so that's, you know, how to cheat death, by dying and then coming back to life. But of course, they don't come back for the rest of the franchise because they die between films as well. So let's talk about Final Destination 3. Final Destination 3 is a 2006 film directed again by James Wong, who came back after the first film. My review, my quote says, "Fuck you, Ben Franklin." Whether this is because they brought back the director of the first film or it's just written this way, but Final Destination 3 was tediously slow, and its pacing just kept stopping and starting at each character death. The film doesn't have interesting characters or characters to ultimately root for. Even Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's probably the best actor in the franchise. Okay, definitely the best actor in the franchise. Outside of maybe discount Tom Cruise. But that's just for fun. Her character isn't that great. Like, she's the only good character in the whole entire third film. But again, they're not overly well written, so it's like, you know. The opening kill ride, because it is on a roller coaster, is kind of hardly as brutal as it could have been. Like, you know, the other films have, you know, really, the first film not as much, but the second film was really brutal in how the characters got killed, you know, whether they got chopped in half, whether they got slammed with a log, all this kind of shit. But then this film is like, you have two characters that are hanging from an upside-down roller coaster thing, and they just fall, and you never see them splatter or anything. Maybe it was cheaper for the effects and stuff to not show them completely die and everything. Maybe it's because we're focusing on the main character's perspective, so if we're rushing past the part of the roller coaster that just flew off with all of the other characters and died, why would the main character be focusing on that when she's trying to survive and trying to save the person next to her? So yeah, pretty much the only people we really see die are the people that are in the general vicinity of the main character, which is kind of disappointing, but also makes sense in its own way. So it's like, you know, don't expect a lot of amazing deaths from the first roller coaster scene. But I mean, someone gets chopped in half, another one gets impaled, and even the main character has a pretty grisly death. So, you know, it's not bad. There is almost no story in this film, and absolutely no growth in this film in contrast to the previous installments, where the first film was this, you know, teen death film that wasn't just, oh, it's fun because teens are getting killed. It's actually dramatic and takes a lot of care and patience in its characters and how they're feeling, and how this all psychologically is affecting them. The second film is a lot more just catastrophic and a lot more gratuitous deaths, a lot more fun, and I obviously prefer that a lot more. Though it obviously lacks the heart of the first film, it has a lot more fun with its idea, which I think was the best direction to go in. The third film tries to be both. It tries to have these characters that you're going to care about because they're all in high school, but it also does this over-the-top fun death scenes. It's like, you can't really mix both when the tone is this particular way. It's like, are we trying to be, you know, dramatic and sad like the first film and care about our characters, but then it's like, nope, once the main roller coaster thing happens, it's like the rest of the film is pretty much just we set up the next character and how they might die, and then we see them die, and then we move on to the next character and we set up how they die, and then they die. It's just rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat, with like one exception of a character that is two characters at the same time. One gets saved, the other one gets killed, and then the one who survives comes back later. They get killed at a later time. So it's like in a far less dramatic fashion. So again, kind of disappointing. And I mean, look, fun deaths, yeah, sure, but it's just you're just waiting for the deaths to happen. The tension is kind of out the window because you just know it's going to happen. I mean, of course, you know it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen in all these films, but this film just doesn't have it as effectively as the first two. I don't know. It's just it's kind of messy. But then even then, it's just not. It's just a clip show, more or less. This film has definitely become a formulaic plot where we just wait and watch for each next character death, but without anything else of interest happening. Like, there's no development for our main character. I mean, no, there is literally hardly. The only connection she has is her sister, and that's only set up as a... Yeah, okay, her sister's probably going to be one of the people who may have actually been on the roller coaster, and that's it. Because she actually was, but the main character didn't know it. And it's like, oh no, now she has to save her sister. So it's like, cool, dramatic conflict, but like, we don't really care. Oh no. Even the clues from the photographs, the only new aspect to the franchise by this stage, because the main character takes pictures of a bunch of people, and then once the roller coaster stuff happens, she realizes that a lot of people, the photographs have something in them that give a clue as to how people have died. For example, two girls who are in one photo together, the photo is over contrast and there's a lot of red in it because, of course, they burn to death in their actual proper death. So it's like, I get it. Yeah. So yeah, it just becomes a witch hunt guessing game of which part of the image will reflect reality. And it's like, oh, it could be that thing, but it could be that thing, or it could be, oh no, they're already dead. Alright, let's move on to the next person. This isn't one of those, this isn't like the first two films where they're collectively grabbing more people and saving this person, but that person dies and whatever, and, they're not doing that this time, which, again, is something different. They're not just, saving everyone to collect them all from them all to die randomly, and, oh no, it's more dramatic because they're all together, they could have stopped it, or kind of that deal. It's, nope, they could have stopped it, and they don't, and then they die. Or they could have stopped it, and then they do, but the other person dies, and it's just like... And then even when they do save one person, that person just vows revenge. It's like, okay, cool. I guess that's something different. So yeah, ultimately this film is disappointing, especially after the fun of the second installment. I should note that Mary Elizabeth Winstead does play the lead and is quite fun in the role, You can check out more of what I thought of her actual performance in my actor review of Mary Elizabeth Winstead, which is the reason why I watched this 5-film thing, but I realised I could do a calm and relaxed talk about it as well. So, yeah, there's a plug for you. I should also mention the DVD, not the Blu-ray that I have, comes with a special feature that allows you to change how and when people die in the film. It's legitimately the only reason why you should buy the Trilogy set, and outside of it being called the Trilogy set. The plot of this film, Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays Wendy Christensen, a high school graduate who has a premonition that a roller coaster she and her classmates are riding will derail. Although she saves some of them, death begins hunting the survivors. Wendy realizes photographs she took at the amusement park contained clues about her classmates' death. With survivor and friend Kevin Fisher, played by Merriman, Wendy tries to use this knowledge to save the rest of them and ruin Death's scheme. I gave it 2.5 stars. Yeah. Note, the Choose Their Fate sounds cool, but is not on the Blu-ray. However, the Blu-ray does actually have a lot of good special features. I didn't notice any special features on the second film. It does have some, but not too many. The first film has the alternate, the deleted scenes, and then a few extra things, mostly like commentaries and stuff. The third film has a fuck ton of special features, mostly because this is when DVD was becoming really big, so hence they made the Choose Their Fate thing, which they actually filmed separate scenes to make it all go differently, to the point that I believe you can change one character's death so one character survives but a different character dies, and you can change it so when the main character, it's even before the main character's a premonition, she just decides after the first 20 minutes, you know what, I don't want to go on this ride, and then they all just survive. So, there's also that. The film ends after 20 minutes. So it's a fun little thing, which I still hope to I hope to fucking watch that at some stage. The original ending of the film was still on the train, where the film does end 4 months after the last person dies. But Wendy, our main character, is on the train with two of her university friends, and she gets this sense that something bad's gonna happen. She gets a premonition, only when she realizes that her sister just got on the train. And it's like, oh shit, look, it's my sister. And she goes to introduce her sister to her uni friends, and then she realizes that the other surviving guy is also on the train, and he's heading home with them, just happens to be on the same train. And so then our main character gets a premonition, and the whole train derails and goes to shit, which is unique enough of its own that this is the first time the character has had a second premonition. Like the first film had those vague little premonitions where it might hint to someone dying. The second film has it more first-person cloudy images kind of deal, and the third film, of course, it has the photographs. Actually, yeah, each film pretty much has a different and unique way to do a premonition, which is kind of nice. Of course, the third film introduced the idea that you can have a second complete another premonition, and so she does, and then all the other characters realize, oh shit, we got to get off this train, and then the film ends dramatically. Like, oh my god, are they gonna die? They probably will. Tony Todd does also voice the train conductor, or at least the voice over the PA, and he is the voice of the devil thingy at the start of the film, at the carnival. But the alternate ending, the college friends, would have actually been the last two characters from the second film, and one of them would have been cousins of Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character. She was hanging out with them or some shit, and so obviously that was meant to be a good way to wrap up the trilogy and be like, hey, this is the end of it, Death has wrapped it all up and killed them all off. But instead, one of the two actors couldn't make the scheduling, so instead of having one of the characters return, they just figured, fuck it, we don't want to leave that ambiguous, even though I really feel like they could have just had a one-off line saying, oh yeah, well, it really sucks because this other character could have been with me, but he died tragically because of this or whatever, which probably would have been the cop, so it would have just been the female character who would have survived. Unless it was a female character who could not have come back. I don't know. Either way, they decided, if we can't have both, we won't take them at all, so we'll just put in different characters. And it was meant to wrap up the whole entire trilogy. They all die, and death, wins in the end. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, which is disappointing. That would have been a nice ending. Instead, if you watch the Choose Their Fate ending, you can actually see a newspaper clip that reveals how the characters did end up dying. So yeah, there's that. And then we get into the final film, The Final Destination, from 2009, directed by David R. Ellis, who directed the second film. My quote, "It pays to be safe, trust me." My tiny review is, it's hip to be a CGI 3D... It's hip to be a CGI 3D clusterfuck. The plot. A group of college students go to an auto race where our protagonist, Nick O'Bannon, has a premonition that it'll all end in a fiery misery for everyone. He escapes with some other people before the whole place goes to shit, and then we get the same narrative as all of the rest of them. It has nothing new to add whatsoever outside of people dying at the same time, because what is it? I think it's a set of characters, in fact, two sets of characters die at exactly the same time, but it's like, oh, but who died first? So they have two death scenes happen at the exact same time, but one character survives, one character dies, post-premonition. This film also includes another second premonition, where things go to shit, and then the main character loses his girlfriend, and then it turns out it was another premonition, but it happens just a second after his other character is about to get killed. So then he goes and saves his girlfriend and whatever. But then it doesn't matter because they all die anyway. A few weeks later or some shit. I don't know. It's dumb. In contrast to the rest of the franchise, also I should say, in terms of them adding something new in terms of the premonition, he does have this vision of all these CGI objects happening at the same time, and it's like, oh my god, what does this mean? Isn't it cool? Look at the CGI objects. That's it. It's just like some visual things that are meant to be a clue that he doesn't even realize half the fucking time. It doesn't matter. In contrast to the rest of the film, the franchise, this film decides to tackle 3D, which the Blu-ray does have a 2D 3D version. They did want to do 3D for the third film, but it was too expensive. They didn't know how to use the tech, so they didn't bother. Apparently they use it in the fifth film 3D, but it's not on the Blu-ray, so I don't care. You can tell it a lot more obvious in the fourth film as it is. Tony Todd does not appear in this film at all. In fact, he only appears in the third film through voiceover. This film is 82 minutes long, so it's quick and over and done with easily, so even if you don't care to watch it, it's a quick watch. But personally, I would say skip it because, it's fucking boring. The kills aren't as fun because of too much crappy CGI blood stuff. If CGI is done effectively, then yeah, cool, because that's what they did in the second film and the third film, whilst also using some practical effects. The behind the scenes on the third film I really suggest watching because it includes a practical effect of a guy's head getting slapped together, and it's great. Nevertheless, though the kills, are sometimes fun and gory in the Final Destination, they are too CG heavy, making the film and its impact ultimately weaker. My notes, it has the worst critical reception of the franchise. This alone, with Final Destination 3, are known as standalone films as they don't relate to the narrative of the first film. I like that in the second film, how they actually relate each character that survives back to characters that survived in the first film, so pretty much implying this aspect, which they do actually go along with in the second film, that if you are someone who was meant to die, pre-premonition or whatever, so if you cheated death and then you save someone's life, that person now has cheated death, they were meant to die, so they end up dying in another way, which is really fun. They don't do this in the third one whatsoever, and they don't do it in the fourth film. In fact, they don't do it in the rest of them anyway. So yeah, they're known as standalone films and whatever. James Wong actually dropped out of directing this film to direct Dragon Ball Evolution. So, Ripperino, to his career, I gave this film 2 stars. Am I going to go through, anything that's interesting in this film to talk about? Like how there's a racist redneck and we start to get into these really crappy characters that are obviously assholes and you want them to die? No, because the third film already did that and they were just one perverted guy. Actually, that was just literally the teen death film where they even have a whole, 5 to 10 minute video in the... Actually, I think it's like a 20-minute video, 25-minute video that actually goes into the teen death film and talks about how all of the main characters in the film, including Mary Elizabeth Winstead, have their own tropes, to the point that you've got, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, the final girl, and you've got the token black guy and all that kind of jazz. And it's a really well done video that even has, Roger Ebert in it. So it's like, it has some great elements to it, which is a really nice kind of mini doco. They do have this big hour-and-a-half long doco that actually details the making of the film, so if it was a more interesting film in my mind, like the second one was, then it would be a lot of great stuff for the special features. But again, the fourth film is just crap and not worth watching, so don't, just skip it. There's not even really a reason why it's called The Final Destination. It doesn't connect to the third film or any of the previous films, outside of them Googling what happened previously. Like, oh, we did some research and we realized that this has actually happened before, from this event with the plane and this event with the train and this event with the boat and this event with the moat. I was making a joke there. But yeah, ultimately fucking crap. So let's just go back over here and just do our final film. This is Final Destination 5. I was hoping to maybe, film this video and have my Trilogy DVD, but I guess it doesn't really matter by this stage. This film was directed by Stephen Quayle. It's actually a 2011 film, coming 2 years after the previous film, all the rest of them being 3 years after each other. 2000, 2003, 2006, 2009, 2011. Wow, how cool is that? My quote for this film was, "Wasn't he dead already?" And my jokey little review was, "The dead just won't stop being dead." I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about anymore. I'm tired. The plot. Whilst on a company retreat, Sam Lawton, our protagonist, has a vision that the bridge that they are driving on will collapse and kill everyone except his girlfriend. The rest of the film catalogues their deaths whilst seeing Sam on his journey of fulfillment of what gives his life purpose, with work as a chef and life with his girlfriend. After a few gnarly deaths, the main characters realize that death is after them, but instead of mentioning, the route of saving someone to skip the line kind of deal like the previous films have, which we as an audience already knows that it doesn't work, it's worthless, and it just becomes a cheapskate, thing for the film to try and save people and then just get them killed later on anyway, because death's gonna inevitably come for you anyway. Instead, this version has the whole deal of if they decide that they can kill someone to trade lives. So, like, if they killed a random person, they could get the years that that person would have lived. So as if them being in this world now is against death's plans, not just for the fact that they should have died earlier, but also they need to trade their soul with someone else's unless they just get killed by death anyway. This is the first new, interesting, and original idea since the third film's photo clues, but yeah, for the most part, I like it. I like that it's got added this new layer of something new. I will mention major spoilers after I give my notes and my rating. So let's see my notes. The opening credit sequence is too long and tedious, being a 4-minute montage of things breaking with names popping up. I kind of missed the Final Destination 1 through 3 openings, which allude to what will happen in the film, whilst using tension and atmosphere to build the tone of the film ahead. So much better than the fourth and fifth film is just CGI crap, and I don't care. It's really boring. Literally, we got to the 3-minute 50-second mark, and the credits end, and I clicked the display, and it's like, wow, that was 4 minutes of the film that could have already happened by now. Oh, Jesus, it's still only an hour and a half, but bloody hell. The film received mostly positive reviews. This is the first film to do so in the franchise. Critics praised the plot, CGI, death scenes, and tone, especially in comparison to the previous installment, obviously the Final Destination. The film was a financial success, which they all actually have been, and is the second highest grossing film in the franchise. Let's hope this is where the franchise ends for good, because of course they were going to end it with the Final Destination, but they still got a lot of money out of it, so it's like, hey, let's make another one and end it on a better note. Some critics have noted that the first film actually is pretty good, and it was shit on when it first came out, but it still made a lot of money, so they just kept making more, because that's what you do with horror films. This film was actually nicely paced and character-driven rather than death-driven like the third and fourth film. The characters aren't too cartoony, and the deaths are fresh and surprising without an overdose of CGI. The bridge collapse, again, I don't mind CGI, but if it's too dumb looking and fake looking, it takes the experience out of it, Like The Thing, 2011. It just takes it out. It takes you out of it, The bridge collapsing scene is very well done and has some great character deaths as well. Literally, that 4.5 minute long bridge collapsing scene is incredibly done, which is a good use of practical and CGI effects. So effectively done, much like the, bypass the freeway scene of the second film. I rather like the idea of killing someone to trade for their years left. However, the irony of the situation is felt in the final scene. Yeah, this is a good final film for the actual franchise. Again, if you skip the Final Destination and just go 1, 2, 3, 5, you get a better experience out of it. You could technically skip 3, but I don't know, 3's still pretty decent. The roller coaster, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, it's got some good stuff in it. Just the fourth one's fucking boring and crap and a waste of time. Like, the dumb things you get in the fourth one, you get in the third one, but the third one's more interesting with it because it's a lot more fun because it has good use of practical effects as well. Same as even the fifth one has practical effects. They just add some CGI to enhance it, per se. So I gave this film 3 stars out of 5. So this is now my spoiler section, so you can skip to hopefully a time mark on screen where I'll just go straight into my franchise ranking. This spoilers is just related to the fact that this film is a prequel. So let's get into it. So this film takes place before the first one in the year 2000, which is referenced with the plane ticket on the main 2 characters' flight to Paris, but also, there's a reference to The Sixth Sense, which came out in 1999. There's a whole bunch of references to stuff that happened in the mid to late 90s, so plus the old tech that they use and whatever, which you could just think as mise-en-scène and whatever. You won't, it's just decor. You don't pay attention to it, you just care about the character deaths. But if you do pay attention, you realise, oh shit, this is a prequel. Imagine being that guy in the audience being like, babe, look, it's a prequel. And then being like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's a fucking Final Destination. What the hell are you talking about? So that's how they made sense of the fact that the fourth one is called The Final Destination, even though it has nothing that really concludes anything. But this film is kind of the inciting incident. It really actually isn't when you think about it. Like, I'll get into it. I did like how instead of explaining everything through Google results of the previous films, thank you, The Final Destination, for that dumb explanation dump, they actually had Tony Todd come back as the coroner, or as the fans theorized, to be deaf himself. And he explains things in his own fun way. He's the one that alludes to the possibility that, if you can trade your life for another person's life kind of deal, which is nice. I do find it interesting that he doesn't mention that, obviously, in the next 2 films. Obviously, because this is a prequel, but released years after. Anyway, made and released years after. Not to mention the fact that in this film he actually does say that, he's seen incidents like this before where there have been catastrophic things where some people survived it where they probably shouldn't have, and hence death has come and taken their lives after the fact. So obviously Final Destination 5 isn't the first event of it happening, so it doesn't give a full explanation as to why it's happening or anything. It's just supernatural, and I like that. You don't have to explain it, you just have fun with it. So yeah, obviously you'd expect that him mentioning the fact that, this has kind of happened before, you think it's a nod to the second and third, the first and second film. But of course it isn't. It's a nod to the fact that this shit's already happened before. So not in the chronology of the films, but in the chronology of... It's meant to be a gag, but it's still, you can interpret it both ways, which is nice. Do I like that this one takes place before the first film? Yes. In fact, I had actually already seen the final 10 minutes of the film. I turned on the TV one time. I was like, it's like Final Destination 5. I'm like, oh, what's this? And it was like the last 10 minutes, so I literally watched the final 10 minutes of the film. I didn't understand the plane thing, but then I kind of looked into it and found out it was a prequel. Took place before the first film. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. So the twist was like completely gone from me because I literally watched the twist. Anyway, so that was kind of fun. Does this mean that everything comes full circle? The creative team behind the film like to think so, but, I mean, when you really think of it, that would have meant that Discount Tom Cruise from the Foxtel Tom Cruise ads, Mum and I both picked up on that. We're like, hey, that guy looks like the Tom Cruise guy from those Tom Cruise ads on Foxtel. It's kind of funny. The creative team behind it like to think so. However, that would have meant that Discount Tom Cruise from the Foxtel Tom Cruise ads didn't have long to live anyway, except that his character was meant to be dead. So, he was meant to actually die. So if he took the life of the detective, then shouldn't our protagonist have gotten the detective's years? That's how you would have naturally thought about it. Which meant that, in which case, it was mere coincidence that our last 2 surviving characters of the 5th film just happen to be on the flight to Paris. That is the flight from the first film. So I don't think it's Death's plan that they were meant to die, unless that just shows that, killing someone doesn't actually take away give you someone else's years. Even though they definitely strongly implied that through visuals that that's what was going to happen. Not to mention the final fucking scene is after the plane explodes, a tire from it goes flying, and then you get to a scene at the bar with our last remaining character, who actually happens to be the last remaining black character of the film, who did actually kill someone and get their years. However, that's when he finds out from another character saying that, oh, it turns out this guy was actually going to die soon anyway. He had this big major blood clot in his brain, so he only had like days left to live. Or days to weeks left to live. And this is, of course, set 2 weeks after he pretty much kills that guy. And he realizes, oh shit, and then he gets crushed by the fucking tire, and his hand goes flying towards the camera, and then cut to black. So it's obviously meant to say, yep, this was, like, that was technically part of Def's plan, I guess. Like, kind of? I guess that would have to mean that was part of Def's plan. Whereas, did that mean that Def set up the idea of, oh, I'll give this kid on the flight this premonition and whatsoever, and then the main character hears that the kid had a premonition whilst they're in the air and realizes, oh shit, we're gonna die. But maybe it was because the girl, his girlfriend, though she had survived in his premonition, maybe she actually had died after he had died, and so she was meant to be taken by Death anyway. But that's just a theory mostly based on that whole idea. So pretty much the idea is maybe the cop didn't have long to live. That's really your best assumption for it. Maybe it's simply because they just coincidentally were on that same flight, and that guy, the black guy, was going to die anyway because he was going to lose years, and it was going to be something completely incidental to him, which just happened to be, maybe Def realized, hey, look, I've got these two guys that happen to survive me, technically, unless it's just like, hey, I got this one guy and his girlfriend, he happened to survive me, the girlfriend kind of also did, but technically not. But if I give this other kid a premonition, keep this cycle going, because it's kind of fun, then the plane can explode, the other kids get off, they have their own story, we go to that later, but then these guys get killed she goes flying out the fucking side of the plane, gets chopped in half by the back wing, the main character gets burned alive, and then the tire flies off and kills the last remaining character. Boom, done, everything's tied up. And that's how it is. So let's go into my ranking for the whole entire franchise. In 5th place, we have The Final Destination with 2 out of 5 stars, followed by Final Destination 3 with 2.5 stars, followed by Final Destination 5 with 3 stars. In 2nd place, we have Final Destination, the first one, with 3.5 stars, and at number 1 we have Final Destination 2 at 3.5 stars. Yes, same ranking in terms of stars, but I prefer the second one. It's more fun for me. So of course, 2nd, 1st, 5th, 3rd, and 4th. And that's it. That is the Final Destination films. Thank you so much for watching this calm and relaxed talk. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. You'll be able to check out my playlist for the calm and relaxed talk, where I've done Alien, Fast and Furious, Friday the 13th, a whole bunch of horror and action franchises. If you have one to suggest, feel free to jump it down there in the comments. If you have ways that I could probably improve these videos, feel free to drop it down in the comments. And outside of that, we'll see you next time on Telecreations. Adios, my dudes. Watch out for Death. He be coming for you. Or it. Whatever.